Notorious Fire. Such a great name. Brings me back to bumping mid-90s rap jams from the one and only Biggie Smalls. Lenny is literally the man when it comes to custom designs. Dude went to art school, like legit college for art. Just look at all his work. This guy has artwork on snowboards and even guitars. He's constantly creating new sticker designs. But more than that, he's customizing tumblers, mugs, glasses, cigar cases. Well, basically anything you can customize at this point, Notorious Fire Company will customize for you. On top of that, his IG game is on point. And occasionally, you even get to see a pic of the man behind the brand. So check him out at notoriousfire.com or on IG at notoriousfire. Trust me, you won't be disappointed in his work. What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 35 of the Size Up by National Fire Radio. Again, I'm still working on the intro. I don't like that "What's up, everybody," but I still don't know what to say. So someday I'm gonna make this one happen. And this one's gonna be really quick because, at least intro wise, because my guest is generally like all over the world, and it's crazy because we were going to do this one in person today because he's actually recording this Zoom from like 3 miles from my house. But to increase time and what he has to do in his busy schedule, he's like, let's just go Zoom instead of me coming over the 3 miles that he would have to drive back and forth from his school. But I'm going to let him almost introduce himself because I'm going to mess up his accolades. But basically, I'm just going to call him this amazing dude who I was very fortunate to know when I moved here in Jersey and my kids were doing jiu-jitsu. And we showed up at his school, which his initial school in Jersey was like in my backyard. I could like look out my window right now and almost see where his first school here in Jersey was. So without further ado, Professor Ricardo Almeida, thanks for joining me today, buddy.
Hey, how you doing, everyone? Ricardo Almeida here. Jiu-jitsu is my thing. It's taken me all over the world. I fought in the UFC. I've trained like UFC fighters, a couple of UFC champs. And now I train kids in the rough and tough streets of Robbinsville, New Jersey, and Lakewood Ranch, Florida. Now I love jiu-jitsu, and it's my pleasure to share it every day, from little kids all the way up to adults. And yeah, that's it. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is my thing.
It's totally your thing. And I love it too. Your slogan is jiu-jitsu way of life, right? And when my kids were going to the academy, and there's no reason that they're not going to his academy anymore. I'll throw that one out there right now, except for the fact that they just don't have enough time to do all of the things that a 10 and 13-year-old boy want to do. So they were totally into jiu-jitsu like 3-4 days a week and competing and learning so many things from Ricardo and all his amazing professors there. But they went on a different path of lacrosse and music. So for now, that's their thing. But that way of life slogan, I kind of don't remember that when we first started. So when did that come around for like the official slogan of the schools?
Man, I think it's been a part of the logo for a while. It's been around from the beginning. I think that jiu-jitsu is life-changing. It can be life-changing. It's a big part of your life, much like many other activities. But I think jiu-jitsu is so powerful because from the little kid up to the adults, like it gives you like a real sense of who you truly are. You know,
Yeah, when you
I
put
think
yourself out
that
there, right?
yeah, I think that some of us that a little bit more on the confident side, like, dude, you're not that tough. And then some of us, they are a little bit more, you know, a little bit more timid. Like you're a lot stronger than you think you are, and it's amazing for the ladies, and it's amazing for the kids to really find out like how strong their bodies are and like what they're capable of. So I think jiu-jitsu way of life is that it's like approaching martial arts more than just self-defense, approaching martial arts not just practice on the mats, but as a lifestyle.
And that lifestyle too about like learning who you are, right? Because I've gotten to see it in watching so many of the kids classes and even some of the adult classes when we were there, and just knowing you kind of said it best with, there are some people that walk through your doors and they think they're beyond tough, and maybe they're not that tough. And then you have the other folks that are a little more timid, and I definitely saw that with a lot of the kids, because that's a big deal to make that bow and step on those mats to train.
Yeah, we don't grow in the absence of discomfort and challenges, right? Like if you're too comfortable, you're not growing, and you're just, you're not going anywhere. And life just puts us in these tough situations. A lot of times it is to see how we're going to respond and how we're going to react, and hopefully growth comes from it. But especially specifically on the mats, like jujitsu is really hard. Like it's not too complex, but it's hard, and the lessons are very, they they go deep with your ego. Like you're not just getting submitted, right? Like you're getting defeated by this other human being that basically just like dominated you, pinned you down, and arm locked you, and you had to like tap and basically give up and acknowledge like a complete and undeniable win, right? Like, so some people don't deal with it very well, like inside their head and their feelings and their emotions. But what martial arts teaches us is that it's okay to lose. Like it's not a defeat until you stop trying, and it's from those defeats that we learn and we come back stronger, and of course it's a very controlled environment. We're not Marines out there in the world, like, dealing with the real stuff. It's still, a very, very controlled environment, but it affords you, you being tired, you being scared, you being, some days not at your best, right? Like you didn't sleep well, you had a tough meeting at work, and you got in a fight with your spouse, and now you got to show up and train, and you're not the same, and someone just mops the mat with you. Like that teaches you something, and learning to deal with those days. I think it gives people like a really true sense of who they are, but I think it really gives them a true sense of who they are in that very specific moment. So not only we learn to grow long term, but we learn to respond to things in the short term a little bit better as well.
Yeah, which is so key too, because you don't always experience that, right? And you use the examples in an adult world. You didn't have a good night's sleep, you had a fight with your spouse, and then you just kind of move on. But when you take it out onto the mats, and when you're learning how to do this, because I think people have maybe a skewed view of martial arts, and I mean the UFC, which you fought in, has done amazing things for martial arts and for jujitsu for sure, at least in my opinion, but they don't always see the background of it all, right? They just see two men or two women in a ring pummeling each other, and they don't see all that growth that goes on. And that growth, watching you put fighters through fight camps, just online alone, and kind of knowing Claudia and getting to meet Frankie once or twice at the school, seeing all of that growth and watching them the same way, growing. You're always growing. Like that's that jujitsu way of life that you're out there touting.
Yeah, like for these guys, they're, Claudia and Frankie, professional fighters, fighting at the highest level in the UFC. I think that, if you're in any professional sport, like this idea of never ending growth, it's super important. Otherwise, you just get left behind by the competition, you know, and, whether you compete or not, like we're able to provide, or rather to make that experience accessible for anyone, like from your kids, like they came in and they had that same experience. It's an environment that's number one, it's safe, number two, it's fun, but it's also a challenging environment. It's an environment that's going to come with expectations, and it's going to come with performance expectations of you being able to kind of like tough it out and bring your best to your practices. And the kids really love it, like as long as they know they're not going to get hurt and they're going to have some fun, like kids will work their bottoms off. Like it's super inspiring to see how hard these kids train. And same thing for the adults, right? Like as long as I could go to work tomorrow and I'm not going to have a black eye, or my arm's not going to be out of the socket, and my head's still going to be attached to my neck, all right, like we could train pretty hard. And yeah, then we start seeing a lot of these benefits for sure.
And it's that training end of it too, because also having befriended so many people at the school, and still, even though we don't go there, I live in the community, so I'm still friends with a lot of them. Just when you see folks and you hear them talk about that, and that training of, you're not always going to get the submission, you're going to submit, it's that back and forth end of it. But then one day it clicks and you have your day. And I feel like the losses are probably more on top of the side of the wins, but that's still okay because you're growing.
Yeah, I mean, the only reason why I get to teach you is because I've lost more than anybody, like infinitely more than everybody. right? Like I not only I've lost more times, but I've lost at a higher level, right? Like I've gotten like, I've lost in front of the whole world for everybody to see, right? Like so it kind of like it affords me this platform. Hey, I know what losing feels like. So therefore, I could guide everyone on, at least on what not to do, at least on not to do the things they got me to lose, right? And yeah, I think that's the environment for the adults. Like I said before, it's an environment that it affords them this platform for them to come and find a better version of themselves through trial and error, and trials and tribulations, and trying to see where jiu-jitsu fits with their daily life. Some people train twice a week, some people are here Monday through Saturday, twice a day, and I have to kick them out. Um, like we just have to kick the guys out here just before the
Literally,
we'll
Professor
talk
does
in the
his
parking lot.
he does his like competition classes in the morning. He calls it the guys that he trains, and he literally just threw them all out so we could do the podcast after they trained. And I felt bad. I'm like, don't tell them it's because of me, because I don't want them to run into me somewhere. But I think that that's a big part of that, right? Is that we as adults, or we in society now, I don't even know which way to characterize it. We never want to lose, right? We're in that winning society, but sometimes losing really is what we need to do to make us better.
Yeah, I think beyond that, like I think that in some ways we live in a very safe environment.
We
Like
put
I think
ourselves in a safe environment at
I
all
remember
times.
I remember this kid that was in the last Olympics. He was a runner for the United States, and he was about to represent the United States in the Olympics. He's one of the best runners in the country. And he said, like, I already won the lottery. I was born in the United States. Like, and that was a beautiful thing of this kid to say. He was so patriotic. But it's the truth, man. Like, we live in Disneyland over here in the US. Like I grew up in Brazil, Rio de Janeiro, very, very, very different place, and there's not one day that goes by and that I don't that I'm not grateful for being able to live in a place where I'm safe, and I don't have to worry about people coming into my house or holding me up with a gun at a red light. Not that it doesn't happen here in the United States, but it's a lot more localized to specific areas of the country, right? Like
Yeah,
specifically in
it's
New
less
Jersey,
prevalent, let's say.
if you go to Camden and Newark, there's a big chance that happens. So you just don't go there, right? In Rio, it could be anywhere and that can happen to you, you know. And I've always tried to teach that to my kids, But going back to being safe, like here in the United States, things are so safe, and the kids, especially the kids growing up in suburbs, they never really experienced like true like danger or adversity. It's like parents, like we go out of our way to create like this path for the kids, and it's a life of abundance. Like we never really face true adversity, and I think sports creates that for kids.
Yeah.
Right, like your kids are in lacrosse now, man. That's a tough sport. Like you get checked with the stick. You know what I mean? Like you have to wear a helmet. You have to run the whole time. Like it's a pretty tough sport. I'm sure getting checked with that stick does not feel good, and it hurts like hell.
It's not fun.
So in a way, it creates that fear. It creates that awareness. A sense of urgency of knowing when that stick is coming close to you. And sports creates this adversity and scarcity for our typical American kid raised in a suburb where it's a life of abundance. Like you could eat anything you want, you could have anything you want. Mommy is always going to be there for you, daddy is always going to be there for you. Whereas the reality in other places in the world is not like that, man. I just had two fighters come here, and these guys came from Russia, and I'm wondering how these guys are here from Russia right now. And these guys, I see them on the mats and they're killers. Like they're like, killers. I could tell these guys been fighting since they were kids. I met them for the first time. Someone that I know like recommended them to come here for practice. And I always like to have tough guys come because it's good practice for our students, right? Like our fighters. And man, these two guys walk in and they train and they're tough as nails. And I'm like in my head, and even Frankie mentioned, how these guys here? And I'm like, man, I don't know. Maybe they've been here for a while, you know. So in the end, this guy's broken English is trying to explain to me that they try to send them to go to Ukraine to fight in the war of Ukraine, and they said no, and they were gonna get tossed in jail. So they got on a plane to Mexico, and they crossed the border to the United States. They got caught, got put in immigration jail,
Oh,
and then they paid like a bond or whatever they paid to get out. And, now they're working like some subpar job, somewhere in Brooklyn or whatever. Really nice guys, but basically trying to run away from the war, and having to go through this freaking like Mexican soap opera adventure just to be here when they have a skill. Like if there was visas and stuff going on, these guys could be fighting, or they could at least be training somewhere to have a future as professional fighters. Both of them have that type of talent, right? So I think that's the type of scarcity and danger that I'm talking about, that we don't have to face being here in the United States. And there's not one day that I'm not grateful for it.
yeah, it's hard too to tell people like you have to be grateful for that because of those two guys' story. You don't always see it. You think you know about it until you experience it. You experienced it through them, and that had an effect on you. And I'm listening to you tell the story like all the listeners are now, and you're really thinking about that. There are young men and women in Russia that disagree with what's happening there, and look at what those guys did to get away from that.
And they
To
said, I have no problem with Ukraine. Why am I going to go over there and like, be in the front line having to kill these people? You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like, and of course, these guys are like from the outskirts, right? Like, it's not the wealthy, influential people from Moscow and St. Petersburg that are getting sent to the front lines to go,
yeah.
into the
They're
Ukraine.
picking them from
It's
wherever they can. That's not going to
Yeah,
matter.
exactly. They're picking them out from like you know, the Russia annexed the provinces, and come on, man. I don't know, go die for some war that I'm killing people that I have no problems with. You know what I mean? Like, it's crazy.
It's hard too because immigration here is such a hot button political topic, and has been for a long time. And I think a lot of the folks that are starchly against it forget that they're against it because they want to be against it, but they forget about the folks like these gentlemen who now can't get here in any way, shape, or form, or the reason the folks are actually coming here for that better life because they don't have safety like we have. They don't have this abundance like we have or have earned.
Yeah, yeah. I don't want to enter like a political
No,
topic
me
of
neither.
what
We try to keep the politics.
immigration. No, it's so cool. Like whether like people should be able to come to the United States or not, or this and that and the other. All I know is this: like what makes the United States great, besides you know the American values, it's people from all over the world want to come here, right?
Exactly.
The day that people from all over the world stop wanting to come here, like we've lost something very special, right? Like here up in the Northeast, we've had this influence of, I guess, like Italians, and now we have a lot of people from India and from the Asian countries, the whole world wants to come here, and there's a reason why, right? Like, so it's how do we do that in a way that's positive and enhances this country. Like, I'm an immigrant too, in a way, right? Like, I was born here, but my parents were Brazilian students attending their master's degree, and I was born here, and I was given a life that I wouldn't have if I was from Brazil, right? Like, well, it would be much harder getting visas and things like that, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, like you're in that fortunate class because your parents happened to be here, I guess, when they were in school. And I think that's again, that's not the best part about being an American is just the cultural mesh of so many different cultures. And like you said, what we're seeing now, where now we're seeing a big Asian influence in our area, at least here in New Jersey. Where in northern Jersey they're seeing different influences and different parts of the country, but that's what makes America great to me is all the different cultures coming together and learning from each other. I'm sure, being in Brazil, you have a whole different style of jujitsu than people that just started in the United States.
Yeah, and listen, man, I'm sure that if you're in Texas, and you got people crossing the border and like kind of like coming into your town, like I'm sure that doesn't feel good either. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like,
Yep.
I understand that. I'm sure there are places in the United States that, immigration is seen as a negative thing, but hey.
It's what it is. But we can get back to jujitsu and all kinds of different things now. But I think, listen, we were talking a little bit before the show, and this is like one of the fun parts that I get to have about doing this podcast is we never really know what we're going to talk about. And it's always great to get different opinions and share opinions that we may agree, we may not agree. But that's another big part of when I look at your schools that I've spent some time in is it's a melting pot of people. You have guys showing up from Russia who snuck into the country through Mexico, let's say. You have moms, dads, doctors, nurses, cops, firemen, federal agents. I mean, you can tell me, you know what I mean? It's just such a melting pot, and they're all there for the same reason, to make themselves better.
Yeah, jiu-jitsu is pretty cool, and it's only getting cooler and bigger. You got like all these celebrities now that train jiu-jitsu, right? Like Demi Lovato just got her purple belt or brown belt maybe like not too long ago. Like the dude that's like Superman, he trains jiu-jitsu. If you look for celebrities that train, like there's a ton of them. Joe Rogan is like the biggest
Sure.
person for jiu-jitsu. Um, yeah,
Keanu
like
Reeves, I think Keanu Reeves does. I know one of the guys from Five Finger Death Punch does because Chris Kyle, I think. Nah, Chris Kyle. I can't think of his name, but Chris something from Five Finger Death Punch. Like they all talk about it.
yeah, there's a lot of people involved in it, but going back to just us regular people, jiu-jitsu is more and more popular. I think that it doesn't have that stigma of like it being dangerous or hey, my kid's gonna become aggressive if they start training martial arts, right? Like so, more and more parents kind of look for it. It's also not, you know, some of these like McDojo schools where your kid's gonna go in there and learn how to break like a half broken board, like a pretty broken board. Like I mean, if you want to use those kind of props like to build kids' confidence, it's all good. But like, you want to build real confidence, right? Like you don't want a kid to learn how to break a board that's already broken. Like that's not cool. You know what I mean? Like go put this kid to spar and get punched around a little bit, right? Like and little scratch here and there is not gonna hurt him or her, and they learn how to overcome that. Like that's real confidence, right? Like it's like, all right, Ricardo, you're gonna go lift all these big weights, but they made of styrofoam, and we're just gonna put like 100 pounds in the side of it. So everyone's gonna think that you're cleaning like 250 pounds. You know what I mean? Like that would be the equivalent to me of putting kids to break like these boards that are half broken. Like I'm not cool with that. But yeah, jiu-jitsu has gotten really popular, and people are more and more into it. There's more and more parents bringing their kids to train, so it's awesome. It's awesome to see it impacting people's lives in a positive way.
Yeah, and when you see that too about, like setting a kid up with a broken board, to be successful, sure, it's going to build their confidence, right? But I feel like what I got to see, especially with kids and all the kids that I watched in class, was that, yeah, they're gonna get tapped out. They're gonna have to tap out to someone. But immediately after that tap out, I always remember two things happening watching the boys. One is whoever the instructor was taught them how to not get tapped out the next time, like what they did that caused that to happen. And then both the kids had so much respect for each other that they both were out there again trying to submit each other, that it was unreal. And I felt like even the kids that did lose or tap out, they almost learned more from it than the one who tapped them out in a training type scenario.
Yeah, it's just practice, and within that practice, like I'm sure every other sort of like competitive activity, there is like certain etiquette of how we practice, right? Like in our etiquette, for the most, every once in a while you're gonna get submitted, and every once in a while I'll get submitted, and I'll just be like fuming, like not at my opponent, but at myself. Like, yeah, how did you get submitted? This way, like you didn't see this coming, or how'd you get submitted by this guy? Like he's not that good. You know what I mean? But hey, if you're on the mats don't lie. You make a mistake, you pay for
Yep.
it, and anybody could catch anybody. Technique is invincible. Technique applied in the proper way, you're not going to be able to stop it. So if you're off timing, if you're slacking, or you slip, or if you're not paying attention, you're going to get caught. And that's okay. That's how it should be, right?
And also too for kids.
That's how you pay for it. Like that's how it should be. It's a microcosm of life, right?
Yeah.
Um, and you pay for it by doing this. And like, hey, now high five and we go again. And I'm gonna go try to catch you. And there's nothing wrong with it.
And again, it goes back to that learning and growth, right? I think that's kind of the overwhelming theme here is that, with jujitsu, you're always learning, you're always growing, you're always going to that next level. And I know, and I'm going to keep speaking for my boys because I did not participate in jujitsu, but just watching them grow and watching them learn and get frustrated and learning to have respect for others and being on the mats with other folks, and something that I think is something that at least I saw in your schools with the kids, especially not like the super, super little kids because they don't really know any better, but like the middle school aged kids, is that when a girl is better than a boy in that age of kind of becoming a teenage boy, the boy learns a lot about respect and learns a lot about, respect for the opposite sex. And, just that level of it is just amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, you learn your own limitations, but then by learning your own limitations, you immediately learn how to overcome them, right? Like it's like if you know that your limit is here, then all you have to do is just play outside that limit. But if you never know your limit is, like how do you know how far you could go? Like
Yeah.
how do you know how far you could push it, right? Like so yeah, even same thing, like man, like the girls when they're like 10, 11, 12, 13, they destroy the boys.
Fierce, fierce. Like I tell
I
people
don't think
all the time.
I don't think a lot of people realize this. Especially dads, like they bring their kids here because their kids being bullied at school, and they're like, "Oh, you gotta be tough, and you gotta fight back, and you gotta do this and you gotta do that." And then like some cute little girl with like a ponytail just goes and like destroys this boy on the mats,
In
and
seconds.
and
Yeah.
not one thing they could do about it. But people don't realize that the girls, by the time they have their first period, their entire cardiovascular system needs to be developed, right? Like that young lady is ready to carry a child. And while the boys are still like, you know, all out of control, they look at the ceiling, they don't pay attention. Like the girls, their brain, their cardiovascular is fully developed, like so their brain gets more oxygen, their muscles get more oxygen, they get less tired, they're faster, they think quicker. So it's not even a match. But then, the boys later on when testosterone kicks in, of course, it's hard to
Things
dispute the
change.
size and the physicality. But a lot of the girls carry on those lessons like through life that, hey, like I could fight back and I'm okay.
Yeah, like it's that like anti-victim mentality almost that they're getting. And it's so funny when you see about like the maturity level of girls and boys. Cause again, I see it with my own boys now where like they'll be hanging out with girls and they'll be whatever they're doing is way more mature and sophisticated than what the idiots that I've just raised my two boys, who I love no matter what, even though I just call them idiots. I'm like, you're staring off at the sky, and these girls are doing quantum physics next to you in a really simple way. Like let's get it together, boys. In that development.
Yeah, 100%. Like I'm teaching a lot of kids classes now at the new school that we opened in Florida. And man, like it's some days I was like, okay, can I just have girls in class? You know what I mean? Like because the girls are so focused, like they're so I mean, the boys are awesome, you know what I mean? Like, but as far as like there's a certain age that the girls are just so sharp.
Yeah,
And it's awesome to see because when I first started training there was no girls, and I think when parents think about, oh, what am I going to put my daughter to do, my daughter's going to do gymnastics, my daughter's going to do dance, maybe later they should play softball, and that's kind of like as far as it will go, as far as like the tomboy side of things. I don't think a lot of parents like originally think that their girl could be like a natural born killer and still be girly
yeah, still be
and
girly, 100%.
never gonna get in the way of that. And they just like, yeah, they're amazing fighters, and it's awesome to see.
I like that
And
when parents do that and they put them in soccer, and like soccer is a blood sport. Like you really got to pay attention to soccer because it is rough as anything out there. And again, I feel like on a girl's side, it's rougher than boys soccer for sure. Watching one of those games.
yeah, and especially here in the United States where the girls are like amazing, like the girls team is like an
Yeah,
inspiration, and that just trickles down into the college level and then the high school level. It's a school sports are no joke, man.
Yeah, and we see that too in my profession too, where being a firefighter and really in all across emergency services was definitely a male dominated field. Going into again, the numbers are what the numbers are, but probably the 90s and then in the 2000s, and it just keeps getting more and more mixed now, because of things like jujitsu being popular and different women's sports and things where they're starting younger and starting to realize that they don't have to be this mold of something that no one really made anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I think the sheer size of like what a fully grown male could be, right? Like I'm assuming in a profession like yours where you gotta freaking carry the, like an oxygen tank, plus a hose, plus this, plus that. I think that the physical size for sure, in and of itself would favor more like a
I'm
male.
waiting for this,
And then
because
there's
I'm not
not gonna be
exactly the guy you're talking about when you look at
there's
me.
not that,
I'm
yeah,
not that guy,
shoot,
buddy.
but you could probably pick up my car and carry my car on your back. You know what I mean?
Right, but
Uh,
we have that like predetermined thought process, right?
yes,
Where, someone looks at me and they're like, oh, he's not that strong, but maybe I really am. And it's the same on the side of having a female firefighter. If you put in the work, and same as jujitsu, you're putting in the reps, you're gonna have the success. If I wasn't in the gym for so long, I wouldn't be able to do half the things that I'm able to do now.
100%.
And getting older though, those are starting to go down. So it's been a while probably since you and I've worked out together. So it's not it's not as good as it was, buddy.
Father Time is undefeated, man.
So, remember back around FDIC when I said Hikes was coming out with a new state of the art structural fire boot? Well, they did. And I had the opportunity to try it on, and I gotta say, it was really, really comfortable. The Fire Eagle Extreme boot is really kinda cool. The laces are a little different. Yeah, there's a lacing system that may take some getting used to, but it's a great trade-off to get such a good fit around the foot and calf. Trust me, this thing ain't going nowhere once you put it on, which is awesome in our line of work. So go check them out at hikesusa.com or on their IG at hikes_America and use code THESIZEUP, all caps, to save yourself $25 off your order. That's code THESIZEUP, all caps, at hikesusa.com. Right, but it is one of those things, and you snuck in there too that you did just open a new school, and it's something that we talk about here on the podcast is just the small business world, and now you're up to 3 schools, right?
Two schools, two
2 schools,
schools.
okay.
Yeah,
And
one
then
of the
just
schools that we had in Pennsylvania, like I sold that to one of my students, and
okay,
then I opened it in Florida.
gotcha, which is another great thing because you also too have like it's like a conglomerate of schools, right? How does that kind of like an exist?
Association, a lot of my students who are with me for years, then one day they're like, hey, I think I want to teach it too. I want to open my own school. And I always encourage them to do that. I give them mostly the confidence is what they need, and from the time they've been here at the academy, they know how to be in a service business, right? Like it's teaching, but we don't teach like a university professor. Like we're here to serve people, like we're here to hang out with people in the best time of their day and create a culture where we all see each other as teammates. And for the kids, there's the parents here too, so you need to take care of the parents as well. So just most of the guys that spend enough time at the academy, like they already know how to do that with their eyes closed. Like they don't really need like a manual or anything like that from me, but sometimes they just need a push, like, hey dude, go do it, like it's time for you to go open your own school. So yeah, I have many of my black belts that have left here, and they could almost not throw a rock here in Central South Jersey and not hit one of my guys that's like actually teaching classes and has a couple hundred students like under his tutelage.
And I think too, it's awesome how you mentioned that it's a service industry, right? Because I think when you think of those McDojos that you mentioned, or mall karate, as I've heard it on some other podcasts recently, but they're not in it for the service industry that you're talking about. They're kind of more in it for the cash end of it, I guess is a good way to put it. It's just like a fitness gym.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to stereotype like the karate guys as like in it for the money. I think that there's nothing wrong with serving the world like unselfishly and profiting from it. I
Mhm.
stole the quote from my good friend Ezra Firestone. That's kind of like his motto in life. He's probably the most successful business guy I know, and that's his sort of like mantra: serve the world unselfishly and profit from it. I think that whether you're, especially us in small businesses, right? Like you're always like serving people, and as long as you take really good care of people, like there's nothing wrong of you having like a good lifestyle from it, at least from my perspective.
Yeah. I mean, but that
Actually,
it
have a
pays you in both
have a
ways.
good lifestyle, you serve them even better. Like if you're creating value and you're getting paid for the value that you create, and not buying something for $1 and selling it for two, three, four, five, and something that's totally worthless, right? I think that there's nothing wrong with it. So yeah, I think it's awesome to see jujitsu grow that way. But as far as the karate guys, I think that it's not their motivation that I question. It's just sometimes the vehicle,
Yeah.
right? Like I'm not necessarily questioning the destination. You get a kid and you build them confidence, but and there's a lot of value in many traditional martial arts training. It's just, hey, don't bring the half broken board. Put the kid. Yeah, I have one of my friends. He teaches in a Krav Maga school, and his kids program is like almost like karate based. I went into his school, and man, his kids beat the crap out of each other. Like these kids do full on sparring with gloves, headgear. They could kick to the head, but no punches to the head. And man, like I saw some of his kids spar super hard. These kids are like super skilled. Sometimes they would kind of like do takedowns too and hit the ground and punch a little bit. I was like so impressed. I was like, man, I wonder if I made my kids spar like that, what the parents would think. I'm like, how is this guy getting away with this? And
I would
his
roll.
high level kids were very high level, and it's a sort of like karate based program. So I think a lot of it comes down to the instructor. If you find a good instructor, hold on to it.
Yeah, that's definitely a big part, because I've gotten to see so many of your instructors, throughout the years again, and watching them interact with the kids, and watching them take another cool thing too that we don't often do is we tend to always want to group our kids like by their abilities levels, you know what I mean? Or by, you would stick all the gray belt kids with the gray belts and the white belt kids with the white belts. And sure, there's a time and a place for all of that, but you also always had that intermingling. And I think you just had a post on social media too about having, some of your adult white belts practice with blue belts and purple belts, for both reasons, both to kind of teach the white belt how to level up, and also to teach the older belt how to dial back, I guess is a good way to put it, or adjust to that to help that person become better.
Yeah, I like to partner the senior most experienced student with the junior least experienced student. And everyone that comes to class knows they got to do their part to, when they're the senior, to teach, and like when they're the junior, to just kind of like, hey, learn to be taught, learn how to be led a little bit, right? And of course, every once in a while, you're going to have someone that's like, they shouldn't really be leading, right? And of course, every once in a while, you're going to have someone that shouldn't really be following, but it creates a really good culture for us, this interaction of someone with experience being partnered with someone with no experience, right? Like it's like if me and you went rock climbing, right? Like, I mean, you're used to ropes and all the different stuff. I know nothing about rock climbing, right? Like, so if you know something about rock climbing, I'd rather go with you than with somebody else that's never really rock climbed before,
You definitely
right?
want to know
Like
about ropes and rock climbing. It's big,
when
big
you go to
difference.
like skiing, right? Like man, I hate skiing. I never got into winter sports when I moved here. Like I hate the snow. Like I don't really like anything about it, right? But if I go to like Vermont and we're gonna go take a class and we're gonna, I'd rather take a class from someone that's like skied before, right? Than with someone that's never really like been in the snow like myself, but they're probably gonna get hurt like me, right? So I think it's just sort of like based on that premise of, skill and experience being partnered with, with little skill and little experience, and then just sort of like let that, you know senior versus junior um interaction happen, and it's a big part of the culture here at the academy.
Which is another great thing, especially for adults, because we kind of forget how to be learners, and an easy way to put it. And when you have that ability to be able to be like, now I'm going to be the follower, now you're going to lead, I'm going to take my cues off of you. I think it's just an amazing side lesson you get out of this, you know?
Yeah, I think it's one of the hardest things for whatever reason, and it's one of the most powerful things is to learn to be an apprentice.
Yeah.
And we're all apprentice in many things that we attempt to do in life, right? Like I think that probably one of the most valuable people someone can have in their lives outside of their family is a tutor or a guide, someone that's going to take them and just kind of guide them into their process, right? Like, and whether that's like a really good accountant that you have, like if you're in business, right? Like, or if that's maybe your financial advisor, right? Sometimes those are people that we actually pay for it. Like they're not really, you know, a really good one, we're actually like charge you for it, right? Because otherwise they wouldn't be given advice,
Yeah, and
right?
they probably wouldn't be that good.
But to learn to be an apprentice, whether it's in the way you eat, right? Whether it's in parenting, whether it's in anything. Like kids don't come with manuals,
Yeah,
right? And we
why
think that
not?
we're just gonna do trial and error, and then what we end up doing is we end up, uh, you know, going against all the things that our parents taught us, and letting our kids do all the things that our parents didn't let us do. And hey, I don't know if that's the best thing, right? Like, so being a white belt, right? Like that's like that white belt mindset, like just being able to go into any environment and not be the top dog and just be humble and open-minded and take into consideration other people's be able to take feedback. Like so many people are not able to take feedback. Like you give someone feedback and immediately they're defensive,
Yep.
right? Like, and then it turns into an argument, or it turns into like you see it in social media. It turns into like, oh, I'm not gonna talk to this person anymore. Like, well, why? Because they gave you feedback.
And
Like,
especially on social media where it's
you
feedback,
just want people to say yes to you every time you do something.
and social media is feedback without tone. No one wants it's just like text messaging. There's no tone in text messaging. So I could write something and you can
That's
take
true.
it however you want to, right? But people got so used to that they're like, this is how we communicate instead of just, hey, let's talk about this real quick. Let's sit here and actually talk about this.
Exactly. And it goes both ways. Sometimes people are rude on social media because they're not close enough to get smacked right across the face, right? So yeah, anybody
There's
could
keyboard
whatever.
warriors in jujitsu too. I didn't know that.
Huh?
There's keyboard warriors in jujitsu too.
Probably more than anywhere else.
Because you're definitely not going to get smacked in the face by anybody there. But that's it. It's being, we call it in the fire service, we call it being a student of the craft. And to me, it's a student of life. You're always learning. And I'm pretty sure there's a martial arts quote out there that I've seen where, the best black belts are always a white belt or something along those lines, like where
The black
you
belt is the white belt that never quit.
there it is. That's it right there. Yep. That is the quote. Say that one again because I kind of interrupted you.
The black belt is a white belt that never quit.
Yeah, and that's life, right? That's the way we should be for life, is that never quit attitude, whether it be your career, whether it be your marriage, your parenting, whatever it is, you just never quit.
Yeah, and stop trying to make things perfect. Like we just have to accept that we're human, that we're not always going to be perfect, and that we're not always going to be right, and especially when the feedback is tough, right? Like especially when the feedback kind of like feels like someone is like twisting you, and you like it puts the hairs up your spine. Those are the ones that sometimes we have to listen, right?
Yeah, it's where you're going to learn the most from.
Yeah, and then the other side of that is like, hey, if you're attempting to do something that's hard, and especially if you're doing public things, like don't pay attention to people's criticism, because they're not they didn't make you. They weren't there teaching you, they weren't there helping you, right? Like this feedback that I'm talking about is from like a closed circle, right? Again, from that, maybe that mentor that you had, and maybe like a peer that's being mentored by the same mentor. Like we have to keep our circle of influence tight and strong, and those are the people that we get feedback from. And then maybe like, of course, like your coworkers, right? Like and your family members, right? Like and your spouse, and even from parents. It's always hard to receive feedback from the kids. Like we always like, hey, I'm always right, but like it is necessary to have a little bit of a back and forth with the kids as well.
Yeah, I mean they're stakeholders. I feel like they're stakeholders in our family, and their vote isn't as high as my vote, let's say, but they get that vote, right? And there's times where I'm like, oh man, their vote, you win. Like, and I have to swallow my pride a little bit, right? Like you're right on that one, and I'm not.
Yeah, it's tough as a parent to be wrong. It's also tough to be right. Like some parents let the kids do whatever they want, and just because they don't want to have that friction, they don't want to have that interaction, and I'm not sure that's the best for the child as well.
No, and it's for sure too. At least I know for me, and I've seen it with you and your kids too. It's teaching them why their way isn't right. You know, or maybe even letting them fail forward a little bit where, hey, go ahead and give this a try. I know it's not going to work, but let's let you see how it doesn't work and see what you have to say about that.
Yeah, 100%.
You know, and even with the boys, like when we decided to leave the academy, like I'm like, look, boys, this lacrosse thing's taken off. You know, we're spending our money for you, and I will continue to do that. But if you're gonna commit to this more, we can't do this. You know, there's just no way we can do both. So you have to pick one for now.
Yeah, I
Which
think that's one thing that I did with my kids too. You know, like I think when the kids are first attempting sports, I think it's good for them to try a little bit of everything, see what's kind of like for them. Like, but once you choose one thing, like, you can't do another, right? Like it's yeah. And especially, I mean, here in Jersey is like that. I don't know other states, right? Like, but like high school sports is like a serious thing. You know
yeah,
what I mean? And even middle school sports, right? Like when my kids started running, I'm like, what do you mean you guys practice 6 days a week? Like, can't you just go like 2 or 3 days? Like, it's just running. Like, if
it's
you run
just running.
3 days, you're good. You know, like I didn't understand what the heck was going on. And that's it for like all the other sports. Like kids that play soccer, like they'll play soccer in the fall, but then then they're playing indoors in the winter, right? And then in the spring they're on some travel team, and then in the summer they're doing summer training. Like it's a serious thing if your kid wants to do well and wants to play sports. And for some people, it's not that great, but it is what it is. That's the level. If you want to be a part of it, like you're gonna have to, you know, match or exceed that level. Like it's kind of like the price of participation in a way for sports for kids.
Yeah, especially again
Sure, here in Jersey, I don't know how it is anywhere else.
if you want to
And
get to that level,
it
that's what
takes
you're gonna have to do.
dedication.
That dedication, that's the key word. And you know, you did a really good transition into parenting here because most people would be like, oh, so we're talking about Ricardo's kids, they're probably these amazing MMA jiu-jitsu studs out there into the next whatever league you can think of, and they both did train, but they found a sport that they liked that I'm not even so sure you like so much, right?
I mean,
Or you tolerate, I should say. You probably
my
tolerate
kids
it.
found running. My son is in the spectrum. Like my son has autism, and he never really like found anything that he could be like good at. Right? Like the only he's never played like sports after school. Coming up, he was never invited for any birthdays. He was always like that like weird kid. Because the funny thing about my son Hans was like he's like super smart with math, and like he's social enough so that he communicate a little bit. But if he starts like opening his mouth too much, people will look at him like, "Yeah, what is this guy saying?" Like, he's a little bit weird, right? Like so, and then people find out that he's in the spectrum, and then he was never invited for any birthday party. Like the only birthday parties that he's had were like friends of the family and things like that, right? But then he's in high school. His first year of high school, he was in the math club. He played some bowling, and then in the second year of high school, his math teacher, was also the cross country coach. And I'm sure he's needed kids because no kid in their right mind like volunteers to go do cross country, you know,
True story. True
like
story.
5K, 3.1 miles, like usually on the grass, and it's in the fall, so it starts. You start the season, it's 100 degrees. You finish the season, it's like 30 degrees, and it's like it's gnarly, man. It's like the MMA version of running. It's crazy. And yeah, like my son was, it was numbers and it was patterns and it was speed and pace. So he was all, and it's very repetitive. So he was all over it. He found himself into it. My daughter just kind of like followed suit because she wanted to spend time with her big brother, and they both got pretty good at it. They both are running in college now, but it
Amazing.
was a lot of hard work for them, like a lot of hours. Like it required a lot of sacrifice, like many arguments of me just kind of trying to get them to stick to it and not take the easy way out, sometimes at the cost of, you know, having like a cool like Thanksgiving dinner because they just got done with the season, but now you gotta go run. Like you gotta go, like soon we're
Doesn't
gonna
stop.
start winter track and like sometimes like, silent dinners and like family gatherings because we just had an argument about running or dedication or school or something like that. But I think it's been an awesome sport for them. Running is very hard. I don't run, I jog. Like I just go for I've never done a race or anything like that. I actually
You don't
got
want to
more
do it
into
with them.
running. I got more into running during COVID because we got shut down. So I got nothing to do. I'm like, man, I can't just sit at home doing nothing. I'm just gonna go for runs. And that's what I did. But I've never done a single race. And yeah, it's opened a door for them to be able to run NCAA. Like my son runs Division 2 NCAA. My daughter runs Division 1. Actually, she'll start running. She's her first year in college. So yeah, it's definitely, in my perspective, opened a lot of doors for them, and they've kind of taken advantage of it and just kind of follow that into the next step.
It's so awesome too, when we talked before about mentors and things and Henzo's math teacher being the cross country coach. And, obviously, as you said, running coaches need kids, especially for cross country. But that coach was able to unlock that talent of his that you may have never found, or he may have
Change his
never
life.
found,
Change his life. It's
right?
amazing.
And it opened so much more of the world up to him, I guess is a good way to put it, right? Where now he has a team because it's very hard for kids on the autism spectrum to play a team sport. And cool thing with cross country, most people don't know is sure it is 100% individual, but you get a team score too. So you
Yeah.
are on that team, and for him to be a part of that, probably even change that birthday party invite. Although high school birthday parties change a little bit, but that type of a group of people, right?
Yeah, and I dropped him off at university a few weeks back, and then I went to see him race, and because my son has no distraction, like he's actually pretty good at running, and you get like all these kids like cheering him on, and some of the kids got kind of trying to be hard. Hey man, I know you could do better, like kind of like yelling at him a little bit, and yeah, it's giving him access to experiences in his life that he would not otherwise have. Like he was always really good with math and more introspective and into computers. Like if it wasn't for running, I'm sure he would have found something, but he would probably like be sitting in some office
Yeah, it wouldn't
or
be athletically involved.
possibly in his bedroom, like looking at a screen, and who knows what he would be doing, right? Like he's actually going to school for cybersecurity, and yeah, like being a runner for sure opened that door for him. And yeah, it was his teacher's doing for sure. He
It's
planted
so
a
great
seed.
to it. And then for your daughter too, is his little sister to just be like, well, my brother's running, I'm gonna run. And then she just took off watching her on social media too, of being like, holy cow, look at how fast she's going. Like I know running splits from my days as a runner. And it's just amazing watching their splits and having you tell me about their races and their success. But it all comes back to that hard work, like you just said, missed meals, bad Thanksgivings, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, man. I look back and now they're both in college, and you always look at, it's at least my nature. I always look at things that I miss, and things that I could have done better. Like I look at my fighting career like that, man, I shouldn't have lost that fight. Like I was so ready. And with my kids, especially now that I don't see them as much, man, I would trade, so many, trips like to Japan and Russia, like
Yeah.
coaching MMA guys, which are, for sure invaluable experiences that I've had in my life. And but I would have traded all of those for just being, at my kids' meets, and some days maybe just kind of like being there for them. But it's kind of like part of like who we are too. Like I have to be my own person,
Yeah.
bring something to my kids. Like I can't just be Ricardo the dad. Like what the best version of Ricardo the dad is a dad that trains, that that serves, that does his things, and then I could bring whatever mix of those experiences to my kids as well, right? Because I don't go train Frankie, who in my opinion is like the one guy that like it's he raised my level of coaching to a level that I would have never been if I didn't really coach Frankie Edgar, right? Like just because having someone of that caliber in the room day in and day out, like he was actually here today. This guy is like retired and he's here training.
He's really retired. Is he really retired? Wait, we're gonna go to an
Yeah, he's
MMA
putting
fight. Really retired.
on and drilling moves with Tyler. Like he's amazing. But anyways, I don't get this experience training Frankie, who's UFC champion, future UFC Hall of Famer. Maybe my advice and my perspective of what I could bring to my kids is not the same, right? Like, so it's a balancing act. But I think for sure now that I don't get to spend as much time with my kids, I would have tried to sneak in, more time. But those are lessons that I carry for the future, and I appreciate more. Even this last summer, me and my son did like a dad-son road trip. Like we kind of like drove around Florida a little bit. We swam with like the manatees, and I went, I took him to do a couple of things, just me and him, and it was like a special time that maybe like 2-3 years ago I didn't really think about. Hey, like let me just stop everything that I'm doing. Let me go do something with my son.
Yeah, it's again, it's that balancing. You said it right there. It's a balancing act. You wouldn't be the dad you are if you didn't do all the other things. And you want to do all the other things and you want to be the better dad. You just have to figure out where the balance is. And all too often, I feel like people, it's the same in my field. All they want to be is the best firefighter they could be. And that's it. Fire, 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 fire. And the rest of their life is a mess. They don't get that balance. And, you have to kind of keep that rolling one way or another. And it's the same thing. Like, yeah, maybe you missed some opportunities in the past, but now you're going to look to create them and still do what you're doing because you're always learning through it.
For sure. And sometimes we see the other side of the coin too. Sometimes when people have kids, then like it's everything is about their kids, and and I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but I still believe that, like like what you said, balance, like having a balance in your life affords you a better position to play the omni roles that we're required to play today, right? Like you're a business owner,
That's it.
a father, you're a significant other, you're a son, you're a sibling, right? Like, so we're like, we play all these roles, and having, we can't just do one, or at least I couldn't.
No, I'd be really boring and I'd be really bored. I would not be the happy person that I tend to be in life. But it's the same thing, summer's over. Now the kids are back in school. I have way more time to commit to the podcast, to this, what I'm doing, because I didn't want to do it where I'm like, boys, you got to go in the basement because you got to be quiet for an hour while dad does this podcast. And I'm not going to lie, it happened a couple times, and even more to Declan than Finn, but then Declan would appear and he would just be on the podcast. So he's on some episodes, which is a good time to have him join.
Declan is so funny. I mean, Pip is awesome, but Declan is so funny, man. Remember the stale bagel thing that he did in class?
Yeah.
He would always say the funniest things, and I don't know what happened. Like we were doing some type of drill, and like maybe he couldn't get a move wrong, and I was like, dude, what's going on? What's up with you? He's like, I ate a stale bagel, and I'm like, what? What did you just say? And I don't think he even ate a bagel. He was just like his way of like communicating that he didn't feel good that day. Like he's so funny.
Was not a good day. The stale bagel incident of Ricardo Almeida Jiu-Jitsu. But it's things like that I have to keep the balance rolling. And I think, it's a great way to kind of wrap up this episode, because as much as we've talked about all these different things, I think that's been the overwhelming thought, is just this balance in life, whether it be jujitsu and training, whether it be parenting, whether it be the immigration crisis that we have in our country, is that balance. So I love it, man. It's exactly what I thought was going to happen today, almost.
Thank you, man. Yeah, and I think that we started with talking about jujitsu, about kind of like using jiu-jitsu as a vehicle to find like a better version of ourselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's many things, and there's different vehicles out there for different people. Some people do it through yoga, right? Some people do it through lifting, right? Like I know you're really big into lifting. Like you gave me that awesome sandbag. I was actually using it yesterday.
Nice.
And whatever, find your vehicle to kind of pursue the best version of yourself, whatever that vehicle may be. Hopefully it's a positive one. Right? I do.
That's a big part of it. Make it a positive one.
And then bring that back, the best version, to the people around you. And I think that's not a bad way to live life, for sure.
Dude, that is a great way to kind of almost wrap this up. But before we get into the size up 10, because I usually do that and we laugh a lot, Where can some folks find you? Where can they find your schools? How can they learn more about you out there in the world?
I mean, everything nowadays is online, right? Like you can find ricardoalmeida.com. That's the web address dedicated to our schools. We have one school here in Robbinsville, New Jersey. We've been in this area for 30 years now, 25 years, almost 30 years now. And in Lakewood Ranch, Florida, which is just outside of Tampa area, and yeah, about 45 minutes from Tampa. We've been there for less than a year. I brought Professor Luke down, who is a longtime instructor here in New Jersey, and it's been a blast growing that school and being a part of a new community and meeting new people. But if you're close enough, come to those places. If you're not, I'm always happy to recommend a place. And no matter where you are in the world, jiu-jitsu is huge now, so there's always really, really good places to train.
We didn't even talk about your surfing. You just surfed the last hurricane a little bit. I saw you out there getting it in.
Yeah, I mean, I always surf the hurricanes here in Jersey. The waves get amazing here. We're about to have, there was just a little swell from the last hurricane, but we have a hurricane in the Atlantic right now. Lee's supposed to bring like epic waves. I'm probably gonna be back down in the Gulf for that. But the last hurricane Idalia, it kind of ran up the Florida West Coast. I was out there the day before surfing a little bit. It was a fun experience.
I'm gonna guess the water's a little warmer in Florida when you surf the hurricane than here in Jersey, because the fall water in Jersey is not fun.
Yeah, it's definitely warmer. It's the waves here in Jersey are incredible. Believe it or not, a lot of people don't know that. Like in the fall and winter, this is for sure like an amazing place to be a surfer. It does get very very cold in the winter. I'm like too old now, man. I rather surf like waist high waves and board shorts than firing overhead waves in a 3-2 wetsuit. Like I'm a little more comfortable in the warm water nowadays.
Nothing wrong with that in our old age. I do feel you on that one. So, all right, man, let's wrap it up here with 10 questions. The size up 10, I like to call them. So we're gonna make this one happen. And they kind of go fast, but then they go slow. So let's see where we go. Yeah. So for you, beach or mountains?
Beach.
I should have just done why I'd even ask. Night out or night in?
In. Always in.
A good book or a good movie?
A good book.
Cross-country road trip. Who's going to be your co-pilot?
My wife, Monica.
Oh, nice. Do you make your bed every day?
Sometimes my wife reminds me and I go back and forth, but every day.
It's good that she reminds you though, right? And it's good that you could admit that because it's a big part.
Come here, help me out. Somehow she can never do it by herself.
Now you got to hope she doesn't hear that. You don't want her to hear that one.
Oh, she's gonna laugh when she hears it.
Next time I see her, I'll bring it up just in case. All right, here we go. $1 million or go back to 18 years old with a redo.
Back to 18.
Really?
Yeah. Could always make more money. You can make more time.
True. Very true.
I mean, I love my life. I wouldn't do it any other way. Like the experiences that I've had, I wouldn't trade it for the world. But if I could go back to 18 with the knowledge that I have,
yeah, that's another big.
I'll pay $1 million for it. I will start with like owing $1 million.
And work it off through those times.
Yes, sir.
Love it. Highways or back roads?
Back roads.
Oh, this should be an interesting one for you. A bucket list place to visit.
Bucket list place to visit. Man. Maldives. I don't know how to
say the Maldives? That. Yeah. It's on my list. That's there. Let's see what you got for this one because you've been in this country a long time. Football or football?
The real football that you play with a ball and with your feet. Not with an egg and with your hands. That's a easy one, man.
You can totally say that. You fought in the UFC. You can totally say it that way.
I know a lot of people that will smash me for that.
All right, last one. The best advice you could give to your younger self.
Best advice that I could give to my younger self. Find a good teacher and be a good student.
Love it. Love every minute of it. Professor Ricardo Almeida, I cannot thank you enough for coming on the show today. It was great seeing you. I'm hoping I can get over to the school one of these days. We owe each other a workout still, I think. So we got to make that happen next time we're in Jersey.
Yes, sir. Let's get together. You could kill me with those sandbags.
Awesome, man. I can totally do that. So thanks to everybody for listening. Thanks to our sponsors as always. For the Size Up by National Fire Radio, this is Pip, and we'll catch you next time.